Beer, Beer, Beer. Written by Avram Davidson. Narrated by Mark Levasseur. Preface. Oh, it's beer, beer, beer that makes you want to cheer in the stores, in the stores. Oh, it's beer, beer, beer that makes you want to cheer in the quartermaster's stores. From an old army song. Chapter 1. One day in the early fall of a year in the early 1930s, Elmer Dugan, a boy in his early teens, his very early teens, was wandering slowly around the village, as the downtown part of Yokums, New Jersey, was called. The streets were, for the most part, narrow and paved with stone blocks, called cobblestones by the ignorant, and the houses were all of red brick, gone dim through the decades of dust and dirt and smoke. On this street, this afternoon's walk took him along a block where the buildings were all tenement houses, mostly all, with business premises on the ground floors. Elmer had a wide mouth and a thin nose and sharp eyes. He wore a woolen jacket and linen knickers and long stockings. Not long black stockings, those, with short pants, long short pants, formed an important part of the unofficial uniform of parochial school boys. And Elmer and his family were not Catholic. His shoes, which he frequently bent to tie, were partly laced through holes and partly, the upper part, around metal hooks. By rights, he should have been wearing a cap as well at this time of the year, a regular cloth cap with a brim, but his mother, who had ambitions, she saw him as district manager of an insurance company or something like that, wouldn't let him wear a cap. She said that only Polacks and Slovaks wore caps. "People will think you work in the sugar house," she said. Boys of his age were, some of them, already beginning to wear long pants, but although Opa had even brought over a pair which had not been called for at the tailor shop, and he said never would be, worsted, good as gold, still, Elmer's mother flatly refused to allow it. "I don't want him looking like no midget," she'd said. "Naked bussa?" asked Opa. "I said no!" So Opa shrugged and sighed and folded them under his arm and left. Also, Elmer wore a clean white shirt every day. Until not long ago, they had been starched, too, but not now. They were still ironed, though. His mother ironed them every night with a wet cloth to keep them from singeing. And oh boy, how she muttered when she did so, and gave his father such looks. When he was there, that is. Every day, a clean white ironed shirt and a necktie. But every day, even Saturday, his shoes needed shining, though. The shoes he had had on had worn through before they had worn out. They always used to buy shoes from Vanderpool and City Hall Square. The ones he had on, though, they bought from the Economy Shoe Store, right near here on Valleydale Avenue. When he showed his mother the hole, she held the shoes up and yelled, "Look at these shoes!" And his father said, "Oh, leave me alone, for Christ's sake." And she yelled, "What do you mean, leave you alone? I said, look at these shoes!" So the old man got up and walked out while the old lady was yelling, "I'm the one who should be walking out. Some one of these days I'm gonna go so far you'll never find me." They took the shoes to the shoemaker, who shrugged and just put another half sole over the one with the hole in it. The leather around the hole dried up real soon and became hard and curled and hurt his foot. She didn't look inside when he wanted to show it to her. She said that if he would shine them every day, they'd feel better. "That keeps the leather soft," she said. But when Elmer tipped the polish bottle, nothing came out. It was too late in the year for anybody to go barefoot, and anyway, he was never allowed to go barefoot in the city. That summer, they hadn't gone to the country. As he was always on the go, except when in school, his foot hurt a lot of the time, and he stopped often, and when he stopped, he would look around. There was always a lot to see. except where there were gas stations and new buildings, and these he avoided as they were hateful and dull. Right now, he was in the last block on Valleydale Avenue near Main Street, and there were no gas stations and no new buildings. He turned off the blue-gray flagstone sidewalk and went tentatively into the live poultry market. The live poultry market stank of something awful, but was interesting just the same. There were always cages of squawking chickens, sometimes ducks, sometimes rabbits who didn't squawk. Turkeys always before Thanksgiving, sometimes before Christmas, geese. Otherwise, that was an extra special day when there was a goose. Once upon a time, he used to come in with Oma, and she would feel the chickens to pick out a nice one. And then Chris, the market man, used to give them a penny for candy. And when he came back, the chicken already had its head chopped off and was scalded and being plucked. Nobody ever said he couldn't stay to watch it getting its head chopped off, and he often thought of waiting, but the temptation to spend the money was too strong. And sometimes the market man would give him a penny anyway, even when he was by himself. Over in the kosher side of the live poultry market, the old rabbi looked at him incuriously as he walked by, and returned to smoking his long pipe and reading his newspaper with the funny letters that looked like music. And Chris, the market man, was talking to some lady. Oma always used to say, in her slow, choppy way, as though each word was being hacked out with a hatchet from a block of wood, and her face looked the same way too, that Chris was all right. Chris was very good. He always saw that she got a good chicken and a good price. Used to say. Now, she said, Chris was trying to get rich too fast. She said he was keeping a woman, too. Elmer ambled around looking at the chopping block and the blood and sawdust and gave Chris some glances from the corners of his eyes. But Chris didn't offer any penny, didn't smile, didn't nod and raise his eyebrows in silent greetings. So Elmer, who had wised up and no longer looked in the back to see if a woman was being kept there, he now looked at the woman Chris was talking to. She had on a white coat, a long white coat with fur trimmings, and she had one of those things around her neck made out of a fox, and the fox's face was still on it, and glass eyes, you know? "I ain't got nothing for you today, Elmer," Chris said. "I don't need nothing." He kept on giving the lady glances, and then her mouth went funny at the corners, and she moved her head and neck, and she gave him suddenly a real dirty look. "Go home, Elmer," Chris said. "Go on, go home." Elmer had learned that if people, that is, if some man, said, "Get out of here," you better go right away. But if they said to "Go home, kid," or "Go home, Elmer," then you could go slowly. Next to the live poultry market, there weren't any baby rabbits here today anyway, was a dull, old building in which unfashionable doctors and such had their offices. Doctors. Ladies were always talking about some other lady who had a bump, and the doctor opened it up, and there was a part of a needle inside that had broken off, and by becoming real quiet, invisible, and inaudible, he had by and by learned that what they really meant was a crocheting needle. But try as hard as he might, he could never learn how the crocheting needle had broken off, or how it had worked its way through her system, or why. But he knew it had something to do with babies, because of the expression when the women talked about it, and in the same building were dentists and corset makers, and one or two lawyers. Elmer had never bothered to go inside more than once. Next was the tobacco store with the wooden Indian out front. In the doorway was the kind of crazy old lady. Some said her real name was O'Shee, and some said, no, that used to be her old name, but then she'd married some Dutchman named Kleinums or Kleinhaus or something, but he died. Be that as it may, the woman stared from her ruined face, as though at the ruins of the world outside almost all the time, swaying back and forth, and saying, all she said, in a droning kind of voice, "Oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus." And so she was usually called only Mrs. O'Jesus. In the window of the tobacco store was like a room by itself, and there were 3 men in there making handmade cigars with a funny board with the grooves in it. Well, there used to be. Now there was only 1 man rolling cigars. He was tall as you could see when he wasn't bent over, and he had a very large white mustache. He wasn't the owner. Elmer went inside. The owner of the store stayed mostly way in the back of the store, the big, dark, old store, playing cards with other men, all smoking cigars. Elmer had heard that thousands of dollars changed hands in some of these games. He thought he would like to see some of these $1,000 bills. The owner's daughter, whose name was Hattie, a short and stumpy woman with a shawl over her shoulders, she took care of most of the business. And sometimes Elmer had business there. Sometimes one of his grandfathers would send him for cigars or snuff or chewing tobacco. And it smelled great. It had a neat, rich, dark, deep, great smell. And it was interestingly dark in that big old store, and the pictures on the cigar boxes were the only bright spots of color almost. The store didn't sell candy at retail, but sometimes Hattie would give him a piece, from a bag on a shelf or something beneath the counter with the brass scales, where she was usually reading a copy of True Stories magazine with photographs showing the stories were really true, as she was doing today. And he got almost to the back of the store before suddenly she looked up and said, "Yes?" He just waved his hand a little as he kept on walking, but she said in a louder voice, "Don't you go there! What do you want?" And as he couldn't pretend anymore that he came to really buy something, he shrugged a little bit and swung around and came back and stopped by the counter and looked at the magazine because sometimes Hattie wanted to talk about some story. "What do you think about the rotten way they treated this poor girl just because she wasn't French the way her husband's family was?" Or something like that, she might say, Hattie. But now he saw that it was an old magazine, one they had already talked about, and he wondered why she was reading it again. Hattie said, "You don't want anything, you better go home." Too bad, because sometimes they'd had real interesting conversations. Sometimes she would say, "How come you know so much? Say, you know a lot for a boy your age." And sometimes she used to add to his knowledge some little item or other, like how a woman, if she was going to have a baby, she shouldn't sleep with her arm over her neck, because a lady did that once and her baby was born dead, strangled by a cord. But not today. Sometimes, even if he didn't have anything to buy for Grandpa, or Oma, or Uncle Bob, he would still ask for an empty cigar box, and usually got one. Hattie would usually give him one, and it smelled beautifully of cedar wood and had such little beautiful pictures, men in old ship captain clothes and Spanish ladies and pictures of Hackamak Bay with boats on it and Indians, too. However, by the way that Hattie was now looking down at the True Stories magazine, he knew better than to ask. "Well, so long, Hattie," Elmer said. The trolley tracks ran down the middle of the street. Now, in this same block, there were 2 candy stores, and in one of them, Bodenheimer's, there were trays and trays of penny candies in the glass case just past the cigar lighter where a tiny blue gas flame always burned inside a brass hood. So sometimes Elmer would buy some chicken corn and candy bananas and some chocolate babies and some candy fried eggs in their tin dishes with a little spoon, a tiny tin spoon, to eat it with. Maybe jelly beans or gumdrops or licorice whips or cherry whips. and put them in the cigar box and wander off slowly, and whenever he stopped, he could take out a piece of candy and suck on it. Start to suck on it. He hated hard candy, the rotten kind in the Christmas stocking. He loved chewy candy. And often when the candy had gotten nice and soft, Elmer couldn't resist chewing on it, and that was the end of it. Until the next piece. Coming out of Bodenheimer's was a man with a box in his hand, and Elmer recognized him because he had come to their door a couple of days ago and said, "I'm a war veteran selling shoelaces, 2 for a nickel." Elmer went and asked his mother, and she had made an impatient noise and shook her head. Then, after a minute, she very slowly got 2 cents out of the old jar which still read ORC ACD on its side, and said, "Tell him he can keep this." And the war veteran looked at the 2 cents just as slowly, and then he said, "Sonny, that's begging, and before I'd do that, I'd blow my brains out." And he went away. So Elmer went back and told his mother, and she didn't say a word, and so he asked if he could keep the pennies, and she yelled, "No!" and dropped them back in the jar. Often, old Mr. Bodenheimer used to give him an extra hunk of candy and say, "This is for the baker's dozen, and give your Oma and Opa a gruskot from me." He'd asked his mother once what the baker's dozen meant, and she said, "It's just an expression for a free piece of something." The door had a bell that rang when Elmer went in, and he saw old Mr. Bodenheimer standing and looking at him, and the old man touched one end of his mustache with his finger, and he didn't say anything. Elmer said, "Hello, Mr. Bodenheimer," and the old man didn't say anything, and Elmer said, "Grüß Scott," which always made old man Bodenheimer smile. But he didn't smile, and he didn't say anything. And Elmer looked here and there, and he strolled up and down the aisles, and the old man never took his eyes off him, and never said anything, and never offered him anything. And finally, after Elmer was looking at the toys and the games, and then he looked at the magazines, Argosy, Blue Book, American, Liberty, Collier's, Saturday Evening Post, Ranch Romances, Dime Detectives, True Story, True Detective Mysteries, Weird Tales, Amazing Stories, Wonder Stories, Family Journal, American Boy, Boy's Life, The Open Road for Boys, his favorite. And every time he looked up, old Mr. Bodenheimer was still looking at him. Then suddenly he said, "I got to go now." Surprised, Elmer said, "Where?" Mr. Bodenheimer got suddenly very mad. "Where? What do you think? Where the Kaiser goes on foot. So go, now, go home. Go home, I say. Elmer, go home, go home." So Elmer strolled out, and the little bell rang again. And he looked back through the last window as he walked past the store, and he saw old Mr. Bodenheimer going through the back door of the store, the door with the white curtains on it, to the apartment where the Bodenheimers lived, and the old man was still looking at him. Bodenheimers had a real good smell, too, even though it was too late for Valentine's and too early for Halloween masks. Elmer looked up the street, but there was no trolley car in sight. Just delivery trucks and automobiles, and one junk wagon and one milk wagon, and turning in from River Street, one big black touring car. A police car. He stopped and watched to see if anyone was going to be arrested, but the car just kept on going. A sign on the back of another car caught his eye. It said, "Wasn't the Depression awful?" Next was the pet shop, and this smelled almost as bad as the chicken market, although differently bad. Pete Miller, a fat man with one bad eye, ran it, and he didn't like no kids hanging around if they weren't going to buy nothing. Did he make that plain? But he didn't own the sidewalk. He couldn't stop you from looking in the window, where there was often a bunch of puppy dogs, more interesting than the inside, where there was lots of stuff, like dog collars and open bags of dog biscuits, which didn't taste like even a dog would want to eat them. "Them's Nellie's pups," he heard someone say. Nellie was a bitch who was part fox terrier and part something else, and every so often she would have these puppies, and Pete Miller would put them in the window and sell them. Elmer hoped he always sold them and didn't give them to the dog pound. The dog pound was way out by the pest house, the city of Yokums, contagious diseases hospital, out in West Yokums, and the most that Elmer had ever gotten up nerve to do was ride past on the trolley car in a good transfer that he found and look. There was no chance of his having a dog. When he was younger, they said, "When you're older." Just the other day, he had asked his mother, and she pressed her mouth tight and shook her head. "Well, why not? Please?" And she said, "No, I said no, I said no, I said no, 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 no." Earlier, she had been visiting his grandmother and Aunt Mary on the other side of the family. This always made her mad. And as her voice got higher and her face got redder, she grabbed the dish towel and clouted him with it, and she shoved the kitchen chair out of his way and ran off. Right next to the Pete Miller's pet shop was the other candy store, and this one didn't have the nice, neat smell of the first one, and neither did it have the real, rich old tobacco smell either, because it smelled of stale smoke. Stale, cheap, old smoke. And it didn't really have much candy anyway. Nor did it sell magazines, just scratch sheets and the Daily Mirror. This candy store didn't go very far back at all, but the back, boy, did that go far back. And there were always a bunch of men in the back saying things like, "Oh, you're like in the third." And that meant in the third race at some racetrack. So everybody knew that Jack's place was really a bookie joint. However, it did have a slot machine that gave out a roll of absolutely the world's worst candy after it showed you pictures of different kinds of fruit. Sometimes somebody didn't pull the lever all the way down, and if you were the next person and lucky, sometimes you got not only the candy for free, but some money too. Very cautiously, Elmer went into Jack's. Very suddenly, Jack was right next to him saying, "Get out of here, you!" It wasn't a very interesting place anyway. On the other side of this, the last block of Valleydale Avenue, on the corner of Main Street, was Berman's Drug Store, and the rest of the block between River and Main was one entire stone wall with one closed iron gate in it. There had been a sloping hill there once, and it had been cut away to make the street, or anyway, maybe to straighten the street. And when they were digging that hill away, guess what happened? Guess what they found? Jack Archer's grandfather told Jack that his father had told him they had found human bones there when they were digging. "Cross my heart and hope to die, Elmer. Honest to God." And the rest of that block, the Broadway and River Street sides, taking up most of the whole block, was the old Dutch Reformed church, plus the Sunday school and church offices buildings and 2 old houses where some old ladies lived and a garden. This, what was left of a bluff, had once overlooked the Gristmill River, or Hackamack Creek as it was also called, where it widened and used to be pouring down in the old days in a sort of falls before it flowed into Hackamack Bay, which was sort of a part of the Hudson River and sort of a part of New York Bay. But most of that river, or creek, there had been covered over in streets and houses and warehouses, lumber yards and coal sheds and stores built over it. If nothing else happened, Elmer would maybe turn into Main Street and go down to the bay. That was always interesting. Berman's Drug Store smelled nice, too. Besides the medicines, besides the soda fountain, delicious sarsaparilla. There were all kinds of glossy things for sale in glass cases, but mostly for women. Elmer was not interested. He was interested in the boxes of fancy chocolates, also glossy, but he had never even thought of buying any of them. Once he and Jack Archer had gone in for some empty gelatin capsules, and Mr. Berman had seemed surprised. "Capsules? What do you want them for?" "To make jumping beans, Mr. Berman. You know, you put BB shot in them, and you put them on something that it slants just a little bit, and they, jump." Mr. Berman had laughed, had sold them some empty capsules for a nickel. "That's all right, I guess. It's supposed to be against the law without a prescription, but I guess the law isn't going to worry about a couple of jumping beans for a couple of boys." Druggists had to worry about the law a lot, it seemed. For instance, the angry old woman squawking up at the counter. "I'm sorry, Mrs. White," old Berman was saying, shaking his head. "I have known you for years. I know you and your family, and I'll be glad to fill a prescription for you. But without a prescription, I can't do it. It's against the law. It's against the law." The old lady yelling, "What law? What law?" Berman, "It isn't the money. I trust you for the money. It's the Harrison law, the Harrison Narcotics Act. You know that—" Eventually she did know that, even if she had forgotten it or hoped old Berman had forgotten it. She made a noise of disgust and annoyance. "Ah, Harrison Narcotics! Harrison Narcotics!" she repeated. The white-haired druggist shrugged, sighed. "I can't argue with Uncle Sam," he said. "Believe me, if Uncle Sam had raised 10 children, there would have been none of this nonsense about Harrison's narcotics. How does Uncle Sam expect to raise 10 children if she can't even put paregoric in a milk to keep 'em from crying?" But the druggist only sighed again and stretched out his hand in a gesture of helplessness. And Elmer, who was trying both to listen and to look at the names on the boxes of fancy candy, Schrafts, Lewis Sherry, must have made a noise then, because then old Mr. Berman looked up and saw him, and he said, not looking angry but shaking his head very, very firmly, he said, "Go home, Elmer. Go home now. Go home." By and by it would be getting late. If Elmer had got too interested and was late, he would really get it. On the other hand, if he got back early, he knew he wouldn't be able to keep from asking, "What's for supper?" And then, likely as not, his mother would yell at him. "How do I know what's for supper? What are you asking me for what's for supper? Why don't you ask your rotten father what's for supper? Or your grandmother and aunt?" That was the grandmother and aunt from the other side of the family. "What are you eating my hat out for?" she would probably yell. As Elmer stopped and looked back into the windows of Berman's at the 2 giant jars of red and green, what were they? He heard the sound of the trolley car. He timed what happened next just right. No sooner had the trolley car come to a stop, it never went any farther than the bottom of Valleydale until it was so late at night that it was early in the morning, really, and the last trolley's time to turn Main Street and go down into the car barn across the street catty-corner from the depot. Elmer was there behind it. And while the passengers were still getting off, he had deftly pulled down the trolley pole at the back end from the overhead wire and let its rope snuggle back into the place where it snuggled, and then he ran around to the front end and pulled the rope there until the pole rose, and then with one quick spark, and no more, rested against the wire. The trolley car was now almost ready to start back the other way. As soon as the very last passenger had gotten off, Elmer darted up the steps and into the car. "Hello, Mr. Duffy," he said. Mr. Duffy was lighting a cigarette and waved one hand. Elmer sped back the whole length of the car, grabbing with each hand the brass handles and the woven cane seat backs, and push-pulling them clatter-clatter as he passed, until he had done the whole car and all the seats were facing the other way. "Thanks, Elma," Mr. Duffy said. He folded his own little round seat down and made his way back to the other end of the car, now suddenly and again the front end, and put the tiller into its socket. He waved his hand again as he opened the door. "Off you go," he said. "Aw, can't I stay on?" Elmer pleaded. "Please, Mr. Duffy. I'll get off before you start. Huh, Mr. Duffy?" Nope. A spot on my dispatches. Off you go. I gotta get a cup of coffee. Come on." And once more he waved his hand. "Okay, Mr. Duffy." An old man in a dirty overcoat was waiting to get on, and an old woman hesitated on the curb, but Mr. Duffy waved the old man back down. Not yet. I got a couple minutes yet."
"Oh, let me get on and sit down," the old man said. "I'm tired of waiting."
Mr. Duffy shook his head. Nope. The spot of my dispatches. I could lose my job. The old man looked around in vague and senile annoyance.
"Where's the conductor? I got my fare."
Conductor? Ah, give us a rest. Where you been? The company fired all the conductors. Economy. And they'll fire me if I let yous. He didn't finish the subject. The old man sort of slunk back onto the sidewalk. The trolley car door closed as the steps folded back up all at once. Mr. Duffy half-turned to go into Maloney's around the corner, a curtain running the whole length of the windows as it had ever since the day when Maloney's, after 30 years as a saloon, had opened one morning as a speakeasy. Suddenly, the motorman looked to right and left, thrust his hand into some secret place near the car door. The steps descended, and the door opened. Again, the old man and old woman moved to get aboard. Again, Mr. Duffy gestured down with rising color in his face. He darted up, closed the door behind him, and swearing, half stumbling, half crouching, trotted up the length of the car, peering under the seats. "Out of there!" he ordered, lurching to halt. "Get out of there! Get off of the trolley car! A fine way you reward my kindness! Go home!" he ordered, chasing the boy ahead of him. "Go home, Elmer! Go home! Go home!" The motorman slapped his money on the bar. "I'm in a hurry, Maloney," he said. "That damned kid." Maloney stared at him in rigid and affronted astonishment as only Maloney could do.
"In a hurry
for what?" he demanded. Duffy stared back. "For a glass of beer," he said. "What else?" "What else? Why, maybe Moxie, Orange Crush, Sarsaparilla. Beer? There isn't any beer." Duffy stared at him aghast. His hand twitched. It had been a long, long day. "What in the hell do you mean, there isn't no beer?" Maloney shrugged. "Why, what would any man mean by saying there is no beer? There is not any beer, Joseph Duffy. Maybe later. Not yet. Is there maybe something else that you'd like?" Mr. Joseph Duffy's lips moved a moment. Then the spark seemed to go out of him. "A cup of coffee," he said. "But hurry it up, would ya? If the spotters spots me absent, I'll lose the job." Maloney's face lost its frozen dignity. His thick eyebrows did a rapid flutter. "Ah, no, then I'll put it in a carton for you. Lots of sugar, milk. Mind you don't spill it. Pay me another time." The day was indeed declining, even though Mount Hackamak, a sorry substitute for a green mountain, covered its retreat behind a crown of factory chimneys. Often the sunset was spectacular, bloody red from the smoke and industrial dust. Today, it was thin and clear. Up and down Main Street, merchants awaited sons, daughters, sisters-in-law, someone to mind the store so they could be home for supper. For some, to be sure, some few who had never managed to move away from behind the store, supper was merely a retreat into a tiny apartment at the rear. For others, supper was on its way to them, coming in a dish or bowl with another dish or bowl turned upside down over it and wrapped in a towel to conserve the heat. "Hold it like this," were the directions. Afterwards, the towels would be checked to make sure nothing had spilled. Sundry little dramas were being played out. "Here it is, Pa. You can eat now." "I don't want anything. I'm not hungry. You eat it." "Pa, I already ate." "You sure? Look at me. I don't believe you." "Honest, Pa." A pause. Then, "Come on. We'll split it." "All right, Pa." Grandpa, Dad, Zeta, Nonna. And in between these little scenes, strophe, anti-strophe, like the responses in a litany. "Go home, Elmer. Go home. Get out of here. Beat it, kid. Go home, Elmer. Go home." Chapter 2. City Hall, the city of Yokums, county of Hackensack, state of New Jersey, had gone up during the second year of the administration of Chester A. Arthur, a stout and tall and handsome man with sandy side whiskers, but a New York State man. Some old-timers around still remembered him as collector of customs of the port across the bay. New York Bay, that is. Yokums had once been a federal port in its own right, transshipping grain from the Erie Canal barges as far as Europe, unloading Cuban and other Caribbean sugars to make syrup and rum. Handling coal from off the Pennsylvania and Jersey Canal onto coastal vessels bound for New England, and everything else under sun and moon, to and from and up and down the Hudson, the Sound, and the bays. Some barge trade still remained. Tugboats tugged their tows of sand and gravel and coal. Grain came in, but by rail alone now. Of the 40 to 50 packet boats which had once called Yokums home, one remained, and it went mostly nowhere. And as for the port itself, it had been annulled by the stroke of an unfriendly federal pen. Yokums was now part of another port authority, and dust collected in the old port offices in Federal Hall on Front Street. City Hall, however, with its mansarded turrets, was still active enough. People had to be born and die and be vaccinated and get married. They still had to have building permits and business licenses. Streets still had to be repaired, garbage to be collected, and sewers cleaned. The morning after the previous scenes, a group of men gathered at the back door of the City Hall basement. They were hoping for part-time work with the Department of Public Works. Upstairs on the main floor, City Tax Assessor Charles Victor Vanderdam, a portfolio under his arm, walked briskly down the corridor and into the office of the Honorable John J. Coit, Commissioner of Public Works. One of the women at the desks behind the fence looked up and said brightly, "The Commissioner can see you now, Mr. Vanderdam." Vanderdam, who had neither asked nor paused, said, "Good," and swung open the gate and went inside. He was a blocky man, blue-eyed and balding, but he still carefully combed his thin, sandy hair in the middle. He wore high collars with rounded points, and so did that angel of the Lord, Herbert Clark Hoover. "Morning, John," said Vanderdam.
Morning, Vic. Well, we're just about ready for the No Man's Land Conference, I see."
He gestured to a chair. He was large and wide. Vanderdam ignored the chair. "Yes, but not here."
"Where?"
asked Coit, instantly wary.
"In Francie's office." Oh. Why, sure. Let's go, then."
To his secretary, he said on the way out,
"Assessor Vanderdam and me will be in conference, Triessa, in his Honor's office."
"Yes, Commissioner," said Teresa. She was plump and a policeman's widow, and as, in addition to her $100 salary, she still had the pension of $50 a month, envious people said that she lived like a king. "A lot of people are after my job," she had said once to the commissioner. "Did they say I shouldn't have, 2 incomes?"
"Quit worrying about it, will ya, Teresa?"
he had said, and her reply was, "Okay, honey, that's all I wanted to know." In the corridor, an older man fell into step with them, said urgently to Vanderdam, "Charlie, we got to do something about that assessment. I can't pay it." Vanderdam instantly said,
"Heinz, Commissioner Coit and I are going to see the mayor right this minute about the assessment's problem, and I want you to know, and I want to tell you, Heinz, that I am going to do everything I can for you, Heinz, everything I possibly can. Commissioner, you know H. Steinmetz of Wholesale Meats?"
Coit vigorously shook hands. They paused at the gold-lettered Honorable Francis F. Flaherty, Mayor. "Mr. Steinmetz, I will personally speak to the mayor about it," Coit said, "even though such matters are strictly speaking not my department, but I will personally speak to the mayor about it, as of course so will Assessor Vanderdam, I need not add," he added with some swiftness. The meat wholesaler fell behind with a faint relieved mutter. The door closed behind them. Coit asked, "He have anything to do with the subject under discussion, Vic?" It was an indication of the difference between the two men that had Vanderdam asked the question of Coit, Coit would have answered, "Not a goddamn thing." But Vanderdam now merely said, "No." "Good morning, Miss Flaherty." "Good morning, Miss Flaherty." A handsome, gray-haired woman, meticulous shirtwaist with a small gold watch pinned to it, waved them onward without looking up from her desk. She didn't say anything. She was the mayor's aunt, and she didn't have to say anything. Miss Florence Flaherty was a career woman, one of the very first local career women. She was immensely capable. She had been at City Hall since before her nephew was born, beginning as a typewriter who operated a typewriting machine. And it was often said he didn't get her job. She got him his job. Which was certainly not altogether true, for His Honor had had a successful career with the Federal Department of Justice, Bureau of Prohibition, before deciding to enter municipal politics on the local level, as the Gazette had once put it. Vanderdam and Coit saw as they came in that City Attorney Cornelius J. Flynn and prominent merchant Benjamin M. Rose were already there. "Good morning, Your Honor. Morning, Neely, Ben." "Good morning, Your Honor. Hiya, Cornelius. Hiya, Benny." His Honor smiled at them. It was a warm and winning smile, and they both relaxed in it. "It's all nonsense, isn't it?" the smile asked. "But what charming nonsense," the smile answered. "Before I say another thing," Coit began. The mayor raised his perfect eyebrows and nodded rapidly, still smiling. "We just met Heine Steinmetz outside, didn't we, Vic? And I promised him I would, personally speak to the mayor about his assessment, huh, Vic?" "Which," said the mayor, "we have now done." There was a general chuckle. Vanderdam said that was all he heard all day long. Lower the assessments, lower the assessments. Coit immediately said that all he heard all day long was, "Get me a job, get me a job, get my son a job, get my husband a job." The mayor made a steeple of his long, fine fingers, nodded. "Then you may well imagine, gentlemen, that what I hear all day long is a combination of reduce the assessment and get more people more jobs. There seems a certain paradox involved. Could one but put one's finger on it? Well," the steeple vanished. The fingers delved in a desk drawer. The hands came up. There was a small box on the table, and, as the tax assessor, the commissioner of public works, the city attorney, and the local merchant looked on fascinated, the top of the box came off, revealing a quantity of white cloves. Said His Honor, "Columbus Day will soon be upon us, my fellow citizens, and we have not forgotten, have we, that 'twas the quest for the savory spices which occasioned the discovery of America and the immense benefit to mankind which flowed therefrom. Therefore, have a clove, have several cloves, Vic, Jack, Cornel, Ben. What? You don't intend to partake? You don't use cloves?" His expression was that of a man facing something very new and very singular. He put his hand up to shade his eyes and his head to one side, the better to examine it. "Only in hams," said Victor Vanderdam. "Or, well, eggnog." "Or after a drink of booze," said Coit, "for the breadth." The mayor's young and mobile face was now all at once transfigured with a look of delighted enlightenment. His lips opened upon a long aspirate, and he pointed a finger at John J. Coit, who, well as he knew that this was one of his honor's games, did not trouble to conceal the pleasure he felt in being pointed out. And, meanwhile, the fingers of the other mayoral hand, not the one holding the spices, felt in another drawer. And out came and set upon the rose-colored, almost desk-wide spread of blotting paper a bottle of Scotch, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 glasses. They looked on with pleasurably pursed lips. If Francis F. Flaherty's bottle had a Scotch label, depend on it, it contained Scotch, from Scotland, and not whatever murky mixture of rot-gut and popskull some cheap bootlegger had bottled with his forged label. Not a drop was spilled as the glasses were filled. "I give you a toast from the kingdom of Kerry," said the mayor, "or from somewhere." He waved the precise provenance of the toast aside as he waved his glass, the others quickly raising theirs. "To wit and videlicet, may ye never die till I kills ye." With here, a here's how, and there, merely a pleased little grunt, they drank. The mayor drained his glass, his eyebrows raised politely, then moved to refill. His associates demurred, a few with firmness, and none, of course, objected to the refilling of his honor's glass. After a moment, with a very soft smack of his lips, he said, "Well, on to business. Vox populi, vox dei. Vic, suppose you, in your inevitable way, suppose you fill us in on the background of the business now before us, Well, sure. Okay, Francie, Jack, Neely, Ben, here's the situation. He paused a moment, let his breath out, rolled his eyes. "Oh, yeah, let me get this map out." He got it out of his portfolio. "I'll set it here, sideways, so we can all—" It was a large map, of the sort which ordinary citizens seldom, and perhaps never, see, but which real estate brokers and tax assessors use as a common tool of their work. It showed the central part of downtown Yokums, with all the streets outlined in black. Thus far it resembled any large map of the area. Where it differed was in showing areas labeled in a different font of type from that used for the streets' names, and filled in with different colors. And these areas did not by any means always correspond to any areas set off by streets. "Okay," Vic began. They all knew, he told them, that prior to the Revolutionary War, his honor, well, Victor, might as well carry it back to the Indians. Begin at the beginning. Take all the time you need. There's nothing else to concern us for the next half hour. Except, may God help us, taxes. We can't possibly lower, and jobs we can't possibly provide. Onward." The assessor. "Oh, well, sure, Francie. Well, the area of the site of this whole city, it belonged to the Hacamac Indians, whose title, as we say, is extinguished. They sold it to the old Dutch West India Company, and they sold it to Jacques Cornelius Vanderdam, an ancestor, sort of, a collateral ancestor. He was the patroon, the patentee, as they call it, and he sold it to Oliver Edwards, who the king, or was it the queen, of England, made him Sir Oliver." At this point, Victor suddenly looked up inquiringly. The mayor said softly, "Go on, Vic. The English we will never forgive, but we have forgiven the Dutch." Vanderdam, blank, asked what they had to forgive the Dutch for. With a very light, slight sigh, the mayor said, "For King William III of Orange, and the Battle of the—" "Oh, King William's War, French and Indian. No, this doesn't have nothing to do with that." Mayor and commissioner and city attorney exchanged swift glances, looked away. "Anyway, the third Sir Oliver, he was a Tory in the Revolutionary War, so the state legislature escheated his property, which was, first the property was leased, to Oliver Edwards' tenant farmers, and then in 1786 it was all sold at auction, and these here," He passed his hand over the surface of the map, indicating the multicolored areas.
"Other people who bought. All the subsequent land titles come from their titles. Pallowell Hills, Owen Odell, Abraham Vanderdam, Ezekiel Prince, Jacobus Van de Closter, and so on. Now."
The mayor looked at him with great interest. The commissioner of public works looked out the window. Far off, obscured by a combination of early autumnal haze and industrial smoke, the skyline of the city of New York floated vaguely. The city attorney looked at his hands. The merchant official just looked. The mayor poured some more into his own glass without taking his eyes off Vanderdam's intent face. Assessor.
"That was when the trouble started. Must have been some mistake in surveying."
His Honor. George Washington wasn't available. Assessor.
"What? No. No, George Washington had other fish to fry just about that time. No, can't blame it on George Washington. Anyway, so look here. Let me show you."
He showed where on the map the Hackaback Creek, which the local newspapers, or anyway the evening press, which was fancier, preferred to call the Gristmill River, a name otherwise used for it only where it ran through the fashionable suburb of Gristmill Heights, northwest of the northwest boundary of the really non-fashionable city of Yokums, flowed into town, open, for the most part, to the winds of heaven. A phrase, however, he did not use, and covered over at intervals in its course through the downtown area of the city, whence it disembogued into Hackaback Bay. His thick finger, lightly tufted with sandy hair, jabbed into the map to show where the creek was covered over.
"Now, the last part, where the creek is still open, see, is here, right here. It divides us, and runs around both sides of Turkey Island, and joins together, and all that is covered up, and serves as a sewer. But, right here, just one block from where we now are gathered, a block from City Hall Square, east of it, serves as a sewer. The course of the creek has been covered over and converted into a sanitary sewer system, and west of it, it is covered over and serves as a sewer. But right here, it is still open."
"And serves as a sewer," the mayor murmured. The Honorable John J. Coit said, "Ha ha ha," and smacked his hand on the desk. "'Scuse me, Francie. Vic?" "Oh, that's all right," said the mayor softly. "Go on, Vic."
"And serves as a sewer, yes, sir, right, that is the problem, isn't it? That it's the nucleum of the whole entire problem. Everywhere where it is covered over, the only way that anything can get into the sewer system is via the toilets and, of course, the gratings in the streets and the manholes. But as to right here, where it is still open, the last part of it, which is still open, well, anyone can just, dump anything into it, anything at all, of any size whatsoever, stuff that sewers were never meant to carry."
The Commissioner of Public Works said, didn't he know it? "That's my problem," he said. "Should be yours, Vic." For a moment his associate looked over, mouth opened but silent. Then he flushed a bit. Then he said,
"Well, Jack, it is my problem. Over 20 square feet of it. I would love to get it on the tax rolls. I would love to get it on the tax rolls, Jack. 20 square feet of downtown Yokums. Oh, boy, wouldn't I love to get that on the tax rolls."
"Well, why don't you, then?" The mayor sighed, raised his eyebrows, set down his glass. "It wouldn't stay on the tax rolls very damned long anyway," he said, "because as soon as we could, we'd condemn it. So we could cover it over. No man's land, we call it, because we don't know who it belongs to. I mean, that is what we want to do about it, isn't it? Cover it over, so as to put an end to this perpetual damned nuisance once and for all." Mr. Benjamin Rose, of the Merchants' Association, nodded emphatically.
"I, for one," he said, "am very, very tired, gentlemen, of being referred to as the Rose of No Man's Land, and—"
At this the commissioner guffawed again, apologized again.
and it must be admitted that the area directly behind my place of business doesn't smell exactly like a rose," the merchant went on. "And with business like it is, I don't need this aggravation. I don't need anything extra to drive customers away. Because, besides the smell, why, I couldn't begin to tell the losses we merchants have suffered from flood damage."
The city attorney stifled a yawn and said in his own rapid fashion,
"Half of the stuff that blocks up the creek blocks up the sewer entrance. Is thrown there by your fellow merchants anyway, not you, Ben, I'm sure, but—"
"Ah, come on, Cornelius.
"At least half of it."
But Mr. Rose wouldn't plead guilty even to half. Empty cardboard cartons and waste paper was not the main problems, he said. His fellow merchants didn't throw mattress springs out their back doors.
"You wouldn't believe the stuff that we find there, day after day, behind our stores," he said, his voice rising.
The mayor murmured, "Dead horses, Mack trucks, the Cardiff Giant. Yes, Ben, yes, we know. No Man's Land is open, entirely open at one end. And just as we can't cover it over with a nice concrete culvert for the same reason we can't even fence it off. And the reason is, it doesn't belong to us, to the city, I mean. And we can't determine to whom it does belong. For all we know to the contrary," he said, "it might still belong to the Indians." If so, the Indians, or their otherwise derelict guardian spirits, were exacting a recurrent revenge via the turbid waters of Hackamak Creek, where it ran through the city of Yokums, named, it was generally conceded, for lack of any better ascription, either Joachim Vanderdam, the one-time patroon, or patentee. A stinking trickle in dry weather, a torrent in wet. "Don't tell me," Mr. Ben Rose, of Rose's Quality Menswear, requested, "that the best legal minds in the city," thanks for the compliment, "can't think of no way to do nothin' about getting No Man's Land covered over, once and for all." But it seemed that they could not. No way seemed open to condemn the ownerless piece of land. The law was the law, good, bad, indifferent, or an ass, and the law kept coming back to the same section of the circle. The city could not act against a piece of land. It could only act against an owner, and this piece of land, certainly owing to an oversight almost 150 years old, had no owner. And therefore, the city could not act. "Not in any permanently effective fashion," the mayor said, suddenly throwing his eyes up to the Seth Low clock on the opposite wall. "But that doesn't mean we're going to allow that damn creek to build up a damn delta, for crying out loud. You've got a flood, filth, and flotsam problem in your backyards there, Ben, again, have you?" Mr. Rose, who had taken off his glasses, put them back on again. "Worse than ever! Worse than ever! I'm ashamed to see some of the things that people flush down their toilets and which wind up washed up on the back porch of my store." The mayor murmured, "Sold for prevention of disease only. Well," suddenly they were all standing up. "The Commissioner of Public Works will get a crew down into that sewer within the hour, won't he, Jack?" The Commissioner of Public Works said, "Within the half hour." The assessor said rather vaguely, "Maybe the state could do something about the legal problem, Mr. City Attorney." Mr. City Attorney pulled his nose and pushed his lips up. "You may have something there, Victor. If the sovereign state of New Jersey—" They were all on their way out of the mayor's office by now, the mayor acting as cheerful shepherd— "escheated the estate of Sir Oliver Cromwell, may he burn in hell, or whatever his name was. Oh, I beg your pardon, Miss Flaherty." "No pardon is necessary, Mr. Flynn." "Then it seems to me, thank you, Miss Flaherty, that if the sovereign state of New Jersey failed to sell off these 20 square feet consisting of 10 square feet on either side of the creek, then those 20 square feet, etc., must still belong to the sovereign state of New Jersey, in which case—" But the mayor had the last and reluctant work. "Which case is that this city is still under a Republican administration," he said, "whereas the sovereign state of New Jersey is under a Democratic one. So we can, alas, forget that, until either the state goes Republican or the city goes Democratic, or," he added with a quirk in his voice and a quirk on his face, "Colonel Corbett succeeds in bringing back the Bull Moose Party." They had all laughed and were all gone in another moment. Even Miss Flaherty had smiled briefly. The mayor turned and went back into his office. His aunt was already there, busy at his desk. Then, her hands full, she moved on back into the tiny washroom. "Ah," said her nephew, over the sound of running water and clattering crystal, "the medicine glasses. Thank you, Miss Flaherty." Miss Flaherty did not say, "You're welcome, Your Honor." She did not say anything at all. And this time, she did not smile. "Tressa," said the Honorable John J. Coit, "tell the Assistant Commissioner to get a crew of men to clean out the sewer there below No Man's Land. Tell him right now." "Agnes," said Assistant Commissioner of Public Works Kendall S. Diedrich, "tell Deputy Commissioner Bradlaugh to send 6 men to clean out the sewer, down by what they call No Man's Land. Tell him not tomorrow, now. Tell him he has any questions, call me." Deputy Commissioner Bob Bradlaugh had a question. Any particular man you had in mind to foreman this crew, Commissioner Dietrich?" The foreman would draw extra pay. "God damn it," said Assistant Commissioner Dietrich. "Do I have to decide every goddamn thing in this department by myself? No, I haven't got no particular—" His voice dropped. "Yeah," he said. "Sure," he said. "What about Joe Horvath?" For a moment, the deputy commissioner was also silent. Then his own voice, lower than before, he said, "It'll be a pleasure."